when we learn how to breathe correctly, we slow down significantly the aging process, but more importantly, we further and finer attune our nervous system. Most people's nervous systems are out of tune. And when we attune our nervous system, we become better partners, we become better in bed, if that's important to you, we become better metabolically, better cognitively, better in terms of digestion, in terms of immune health, like everything about us improves.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself, and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up, because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior, and on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
All right. Once again, thank you, Nikki, for allowing me to share this information with your men. It means that you care about them deeply. And if you're tuned in today could be the information that you learn that can change the course of your life. And I don't say that lightly. And a lot of people can blow smoke up your ass, but I'm not here to do that. I'm here to share with you information that I think is very applicable, very practical, and something that can help you, your parents, your spouses, your lovers, your children, if you have any, your grandchildren, if you have any. This can completely change the course of their life. And it almost sounds too good to be true. And initially, when I learned about this information, it wasn't presented to me in such a way that it landed. So my objective today is to make a very compelling argument and help you see an opportunity in your health that perhaps you haven't seen before, and make it so compelling that you can't unsee it. So tall order, but I've done this for thousands of people, and I know that you're going to be part of that group as well. When you leave here today, even as you're here, you're gonna see the value of what we're talking about. So as Nikki mentioned, I'd like to talk to you about breathing. We're going to go beyond breathing, and what I'm going to share with you is how our breath shapes our face, our physiology, and our future. Many of you may have heard the word or the term pranayama. Prana means life force, and yama means control. So our life force loosely also translates to our breath. So controlling our breath, which is our life force, is what we're going to be talking about today. And when you can control this life force, you can control the forces in your life, both internally in your body, externally in your environment, and then also in helping you release trauma, but also create a better future for yourself. The breath is the most powerful health technology that you've likely never heard of. Usually when we think of breath, we might think of meditation, and it kind of gets reduced and categorized in that way. I'm going to share with you how breath plays such an important role in your health. Now, breath is both an art and a science. So it can be interpreted in so many different ways, but there is strong, literally thousands of years of breath work has been done, and thousands of papers have been written on how breath affects our physiology. And having come out of this scamdemic, which was an upper respiratory issue, and nobody's talking about breathing, is a very interesting observation for me as somebody who's a chiropractor, functional medicine practitioner, breathwork facilitator, and educator, to think that nobody except a handful of people were talking about how we can use our breath to actually enhance our physiological function and also enhance our immune function. Now, Leonardo da Vinci said that the greatest sign of sophistication is simplicity. So what that means to me is that what we're searching for and what we should always be looking for are simple solutions. So your body is already sophisticated. What makes it sophisticated is that it's simple to take care of. So the zenith of sophistication and simplicity is the breath. It's hidden literally in plain sight. They say the answers are right under your nose, and nothing could be more true when it comes to your breath. Viktor Frankl said that between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. I took that a bit further, and I said that between the stimulus and response, there is a breath. And in that breath, is our power to choose our response. Our response lies in our growth and our freedom. So in between the stimulus and response, there is a breath. Paying attention to how you breathe changes how you respond to any situation that you're in. In fact, paying attention to how other people around you breathe when presented with a challenge is a window into their nervous system. So just like the eyes are a window into our soul, the breath is a window into the nervous system, and the nervous system never lies, as you'll learn as we go through this presentation. Every day we take about 23,000 breaths, most of which for most people, men and women, children and adults, are unconscious. In fact, for me, for the first 44 years of my life, I'm 47 this year, I was not as conscious about my breathing as I am now until I learned what I'm going to share with you today. Every day we consume 30 pounds of air, which means that you consume more air in a day than food in a week. So you actually interact with your environment more with air than you do with food. However, so much emphasis is paid on food when it comes to our health and wellness. And while it's important, I would argue that nothing's more important than the way you breathe. In fact, what I would argue is that how long you can live without something illustrates the importance of its and where it fits in the hierarchy of health. So you could not eat for a few weeks. In fact, there's people that cannot eat for months and months and months. You can not sleep for a few days, but you can't not breathe for more than just a few minutes. So that in and of itself should tell you how important it is. Now, here's what's interesting is there are more molecules of oxygen in each breath than there are grains of sand on the entire planet. So every breath you take in and out, the 23,000 of them, plus or minus, you are moving billions upon billions of molecules, in fact, trillions of molecules of oxygen in and out of your body every single breath that you take. Now, what happens to this oxygen is it binds to red blood cells, which it then is carried through 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body. So just think of the journey that a single molecule of oxygen takes. Now, the only place we use this oxygen is in our mitochondria. Our mitochondria are referred to as the power plants of our cells. And in our cells, we have sometimes, dozens, hundreds, or thousands of mitochondria. In fact, 10% of your weight is mitochondria. So if you're 150 pounds, 15 pounds of that is mitochondria, which is found in your cells. And the thing that ages us the fastest is when we have mitochondrial decay. Your mitochondria can only live 5 seconds without oxygen. Okay, so if they are deprived of oxygen for 5 seconds, your mitochondria die. And as that progressively happens, all your organs start to fail, and slowly you slip into the afterlife. Now, here's what's interesting. The slower we breathe, the more oxygen we actually absorb. The average person overbreathes. The average person takes about 15 to 20 breaths per minute, and we should only be breathing consciously, if we're breathing, about 5 to 6 breaths a minute. So the slower we breathe, the more we actually deliver oxygen to our tissues. This is known as the Bohr effect. As we slow down our breath, we increase CO2 levels, which decreases the pH of our blood, which actually dumps more oxygen to the tissue. So if you're recovering from exercise or you're trying to go in between sets, breathing more actually has the exact opposite effect. Breathing more makes your blood more acidic and has less oxygen delivery to the cells. So slowing down your breath will actually enhance your cellular function to the point where this makes sense. So if you were to stop breathing, let's say somebody's knocked unconscious or somebody stops breathing for whatever reason, this is actually a protective mechanism, because if you stop breathing, the CO2 concentration in your blood increases as the waste product of CO2 builds up from cellular metabolism. And guess what? As that's happening, more oxygen is being delivered from your blood to your tissues, keeping you alive for several minutes after you stop breathing. So amazing how God designed us in such a way that we can even live longer. We can extend our lifespan out of an emergency by simply applying this Bohr effect. Now, here's what's also interesting: the slower we breathe, the slower we age. So there's all this stuff that's going on around longevity, right? And so the fastest way to slow down the aging process, no pun intended, is to breathe less, breathe slower. And when you breathe slower, you're going to shift a lot of things in your body. You're going to get more oxygen delivery, and you're going to put your nervous system into what's called a more parasympathetic state. And it's in a parasympathetic state that you heal every cell, tissue, organ, and system in your body simultaneously. The reason most people are sick these days is because they're sympathetic dominant. When you're sympathetic dominant, nothing works the way you want it to work. Everything becomes so much harder. Testosterone levels drop, blood sugar levels increase, heart rate increases, blood pressure increases, infertility and dysfunction when it comes to reproductive health increases when we're in this perpetual fight or flight state. Digestion becomes compromised, immune system health becomes compromised. And so every goal that a person has when it comes to their health lives on the side of the fence that's known as the parasympathetic division. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. Slowing down your breath helps you get your nervous system into the state that allows you to repair, regenerate, rejuvenate, restore, and repair. In fact, what's really interesting is that when you study animals in nature, the animals that breathe the fastest age the fastest and live the shortest. So for example, a turtle takes about 3 breaths a minute, lives to about 150 to 200 years. A human being breathes about 15 to 20 breaths a minute, lives till about 80 if they're lucky. And then a dog takes about 35 breaths a minute and ages about 7 times faster. So there's an inverse correlation between lifespan and respiration. The greatest predictor of lifespan, according to the Framingham study, is lung capacity. So your capacity to breathe, how much volume of air your lungs can take in, is the single greatest predictor of how long you're going to live. Now, nobody talks about this, right? We hear all sorts of things about, oh, the more muscle mass you have, the better it is for aging. Well, that's great, but everything falls back to how well you breathe, because if you can't get oxygen to your cells, especially your mitochondria, if you can't get oxygen to your mitochondria, it doesn't matter how much muscle you have, okay? You need to have proper and sufficient lung capacity to sustain life. In fact, on average, we burn about 1,200 calories per day simply breathing. So it's the most calorically active thing that we do. Think about how much you'd have to run to burn 1,200 calories, right? It's almost impossible to even imagine what that would be like. Now, here's something that you might find fascinating. I know some of you might be on a health journey. Maybe you're trying to lose some weight. Well, here's what's really cool. For every 10 pounds that you lose, 8.4 of those pounds are through the lungs, because the byproduct of cellular respiration, which is what's the waste product of mitochondrial respiration, is CO2 and water. So you breathe out the CO2, 8.4 pounds of it for every 10 pounds that you lose, and the other 1.6 pounds is water. Most people don't know this, but your body actually makes water. It makes something called deuterium depleted water, which is a special form of water that regenerates and rejuvenates our body. So when you think about this for a moment, most people don't know this. In fact, when they did a study and surveyed medical professionals, family doctors, dietitians, and personal trainers, very few people actually knew that the byproduct and where the weight went was actually through the lungs and with water. Most medical doctors didn't know the answer. Dietitians were the ones that knew the answer. Even personal trainers didn't know the answer. They thought it was dissipated through heat and energy. It's actually water and carbon dioxide. So every breath you exhale, you're exhaling little pieces of you, and you're becoming lighter with every breath that you actually take. Breath is the most potent and fastest acting adaptogen. So you've heard of adaptogens like rhodiola and ashwagandha and theanine and other compounds, but there's nothing faster and more predictable and more potent than changing the way you breathe. In fact, your body uses the breath to change your state. So for example, if a lion were to walk into your room right now, assuming you're afraid of lions, or perhaps you should be, you would instantly gasp, because that would increase your lung volume. Your lungs would rapidly expand, squeezing your heart, which would increase your blood pressure instantaneously. See, breathing is not just the exchange of gases. There's a physical effect that breathing has on our bodies as well. If you were to feel a sense of relief, automatically, without even thinking about it, you would sigh. Sighing tells our nervous system that we're safe. So breath is something that our nervous system already uses in order to change its state and to change its chemistry. Now, a key contributor to oral health is actually how we breathe. Believe it or not, mouth breathing is the number one cause of cavities. 50% of people are habitual mouth breathers. 66% of people sleep with their mouth open. So your dentists love that because it's the number one cause of cavities, while most people think it's their toothpaste, or they think it's the sugar that they're eating. And not that I'm condoning that, but if you're breathing through your mouth, you're creating a catastrophic, health outcome for your oral health, for your heart health, for your immune health, for your lung health, and for your nervous system health, all at the same time, just by simply breathing through the wrong hole in your face. Mouth breathers require more sugar to stimulate their taste buds. So breathing through our mouth actually changes the types of foods that we eat and the foods that we crave and how those foods actually taste. So if children are breathing through their mouth, which many of them do, unfortunately, they're going to crave sugary foods. And you're going to try to stop them, but it's going to be really difficult to do so because their taste buds have been altered by the way they breathe. Now, another interesting fact is that the number 3 cause of divorce is dysfunctional nighttime breathing, also known as snoring. So think about that for a minute and how many different industries, dysfunctional breathing touches. Snoring is a number 3 cause of divorce. Sleep apnea and snoring are common contributors to elevated morning blood sugar levels. I get so many clients come to me and they've tried a million different diets and their blood sugar is still high. Turns out that they're mouth breathing while they sleep. And because of that, their cortisol stays high. They don't feel rested in the morning. They don't dream. They don't have erections. They have all kinds of other problems, which there are dozens and dozens of supplements they can pop and pray and take. However, by simply taping their mouth shut at night, all these problems go away within days. It doesn't take hours to fix or months to fix these things. And most of the time, the fix is absolutely free. You just have to change a behavior. 1/3, and now research is showing up to 100% of ADD is associated with how children breathe. So dysfunctionally breathing children and adults are much more likely to have attention deficit disorders as well. So before they medicate or before you medicate or someone you love medicates, change the way they breathe and watch what happens. It's so amazing how quickly these shifts can take place. Now, our breathing signature, the way we breathe habitually, informs our nervous system to create specific hormones and neurotransmitters. So somebody who is a habitual short, shallow breather is going to have different hormones coursing through their body and different neurotransmitters coursing through their body than somebody who is an intentional slow breather. Right? And it seems obvious when you say it, but how many people are breathing in a short, shallow way and not even aware that the way they're breathing is actually causing them to feel the way they feel. And so they try to change their state using things like coffee, using things like supplements, using things like medications, using things like drugs, legal and illegal. But if they change the way they breathed, then everything could change in a faster, much safer way for them. Our breathing signature also creates safety for those around us. So if you're interacting with your spouse, your children, if you're on calls with colleagues or in person at conferences, the way you breathe will actually create a toroidal signature that goes 6 feet outside of your field and change how people feel around you. If somebody was breathing through their mouth, short, shallow breathing through their mouth, and you're sitting next to them, you're immediately going to be like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Right? So we already know, when I use extreme examples, we already know that this is going to change how we feel, and it's probably changing how they feel. So we know that the opposite of that can also be true. Somebody who's breathing in a very slow, calm cadence and fashion is going to also change the energy field around them as well. Now, what's also interesting is the way we breathe also changes our facial structure and attractiveness. So some of you might have children, and if your children are, at any age, it doesn't really matter, but let's say they're between the age of 0 and 13, the way they breathe is going to change the way their sinuses form, the way their dental arches form, the way their facial structure forms, their chin, their jaw. All those things are determined by how they actually breathe. So I'll share a picture of me from several years ago. It didn't have any hair, but what you can see here, if you just look at kind of this part of my face and you compare it to this picture over here, this is when I didn't know anything about breathing, when I just started learning about how to breathe. And this is me a couple of years ago, actually, now, when after 3 to 4 years of corrective breathing, just breathing the way God intended us to breathe with intention and with awareness, it completely changed the shape of my face. And it can do the same for your children, especially, but it can do the same for you as well. Now, breath work can also be equated to plant medicine. In fact, I've taken thousands of people through psychedelic breathwork experiences that have, and they've compared it to plant medicine journeys. I don't know if any of you have done plant medicine journeys, but I certainly have, and breathwork comes close, if not exceeds, plant medicine in the experiences that you can have and the insights that you can have. Both of these modalities turn off something called the default mode network. The default mode network is where we create ruminating thoughts. And so it's hard to write a new story for your life, for your business, for your marriage, for your relationships, for yourself, if you have the same thoughts over and over and over again. Breathwork and plant medicines help shut down those ruminations and allow us to write a new story. So Ram Dass was, he's an interesting fellow, interesting story. He was distributing with him and his partner, Timothy Leary. They were both professors at Harvard, and they were distributing LSD to study the effects of LSD on their students. They eventually got caught and they got kicked out of school, and they both went to India. Ram Dass found himself in India at the foothill of the Himalayas, where he met his guru, Neem Karoli. Neem Karoli showed him how to use breath to create psychedelic type of experiences. And from that moment on, he threw away the LSD and started using his breath to attune his nervous system and to create amazing experiences for himself and his followers. So lots of great history around spiritual practices and breathing. And Ram Dass, for those of you that don't know, wrote the book Be Here Now. That was one of his most famous books that he wrote. He passed away in 2022, just before I got to meet him. So I kind of missed the boat there, but amazing, amazing fellow. Now, breathing, as I mentioned, can lead to profound spiritual experiences. So what they've discovered, thousands of years ago, so yogis in the Himalayas and seekers use their breath to create these experiences. And they discovered different breathing patterns in order to elucidate different responses. So you have people like Stan Grof, who developed something called holotropic breathing, which was designed to mimic the effects of LSD and other psychedelics. You have Wim Hof. Some of you might know him as the Iceman. He uses breath to get into altered states. My mentor, Giovanni Bartolomeo, taught me how to help people create altered states and create profound spiritual experiences and shifts. Breath can also be used to release trauma. So we've used this with prisoners, with people who have PTSD, people who, perhaps can't use, what are currently illegal drugs, such as plant medicines. We can use the breath to create these experiences. Here's a picture of me taking about 100 health practitioners through the very process. And by the end of it, they're just melting in their own pool of emotions, because where we store our emotions in our body is in our diaphragm, which is a muscle that sits right underneath your lungs. And where we store our grief in our body is in our lungs. So if you've ever had trauma, if you're holding on to grief, it's going to be with the respiratory apparatus. Now, what they say is breath is life. When a child is born, what's the first thing we pay attention to? We pay attention to their breath. When somebody passes away, we say that we were there for their last breath, or they took their last breath at such and such time. This is a picture of my grandfather on the left. I missed his last breath by a traffic light. I still remember this to this day. I missed his last breath just by a couple of minutes. And on the right is a picture of my grandmother. You might have a hard time seeing her there, but this is my entire family surrounding her, being present for her last breath. So if you ever are blessed with that opportunity, it's one of the most profound personal spiritual experiences that you'll ever have. So be there for the first breath. And if you can be there for the last breath, it's quite magical. So my objective today is to teach you why we breathe, how to breathe better, hopefully I've created and piqued your interest in why breathing is important. And what I'd love to do is just take a pause here. Nikki, if there's anything you'd like to add or share, please go ahead. And for the gentlemen who are tuned in, type in what your biggest takeaway has been so far, or what your aha moment has been, if you've learned something new from what I've shared. And then we'll dive deeper into the presentation.
So, Sachin, I got a few things. I've been taking some really detailed notes, but like, you're sure that picture on the right is taken later than the picture of the left of you? Because you look like about 5 years younger, minimum, even though you've got like a fuller beard. Like
this one?
Yeah. So you look at least 5 years younger in this other picture.
Mm.
So that's incredible to me.
Thank you.
Wow. So what do you attribute that to? Really, that's the breath?
Well, I mean, I can't say that the only thing I do is breathe better.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of things that I've learned, and some of which I'll talk about today, of course, as time permits. But I think a big thing is when we learn how to breathe correctly, we slow down significantly the aging process.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we further and finer attune our nervous system. Most people's nervous systems are out of tune. So it's like a guitar or a piano that isn't tuned properly. Playing it louder doesn't fix the problem, right? You have to get it tuned. And when we attune our nervous system, we become better at everything. We become better as partners. We become better in bed, if that's important to you. We become better metabolically. We become better cognitively. We become better in terms of digestion, in terms of immune health. Like, everything about us improves. Like, every single goal that every single one of you has with regards to your health requires that your nervous system is correctly tuned. No matter what supplements you take, how much you exercise, none of that stuff matters if your nervous system is out of whack. And that's what we find with most people. And so even if it's a 5 to 10% improvement over the course of 23,000 breaths every single day, you're going to start to get a massive ROI. Okay.
That's
so
incredible.
it can happen very quickly for people. It's pretty amazing how when we change the way somebody breathes, the implications of it are so rapid. It doesn't take a long time for people to see a difference, because our body uses the breath as one of the fastest ways to change its state. So knowing that, we know that if we can do it consciously, right? If we were breathing unconscious and we got this far, imagine what breathing consciously, how far that would get us and how quickly we'd get there.
I have a question. Does a deviated septum affect, obviously, I have a bad deviated septum, and how does that affect what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's not uncommon. Many people have a deviated septum. It depends on the severity of that deviated septum. So some people may need a surgical or non-surgical intervention to correct it. There are, balloon therapies that you can do where they put a balloon in your nose and blow it up, and then that readjusts your septum, or some people may need a surgery. So it just depends on how significant it is. But what's interesting about the nose, because I have a deviated septum myself, what's interesting about the nose is that the more you breathe through your nose, the more it opens up. So your sinuses are one of those tissues or your nose is one of those tissues. If you don't use it, you lose it. So as you start breathing more consistently through your nose, everything's going to open up, and it's going to make it easier for you to breathe through your nose.
I wanted to ask about posture. So I've been working on my posture, and I think I've seen along the way that mouth breathing can affect that with the bones in the jaw and whatnot. So my question is, can that help? And as well, does it take longer for someone that's more aged to get this change in their jaw and also in their posture?
A great question. I'm actually going to come to that when I talk about mouth breathing. So I'll show you some of the results in a few minutes. Is that cool? Perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. So thank you for what you're sharing. And yeah, Arpa, I think once we unlock this for you, it's going to be totally a game changer. Yeah. And, when I learned that 50% of people are mouth breathers, I didn't believe it. But then I just walked downtown. Next time you go to the mall, just pay attention to how many people are breathing through their nose and how many people are breathing through their mouth. It won't be, you might not see it so much on a Zoom call or something like that, but just pay attention when people are mildly exerting themselves, because they're usually breathing unconsciously and they'll find themselves breathing through their mouth. And when somebody's breathing through their mouth, we already immediately know their nervous system is in fight or flight. So I'll keep going because I have a few more things to cover, and then I'll come back to some more questions. So why do we breathe? We breathe to remove CO2. CO2 is a chemical signaler in our body, but it's also a waste product. So we get rid of it through our lungs. We also breathe to make energy in the mitochondria, the little batteries that we have inside of our cells. We also breathe to regulate our pH. So people who try to regulate their pH with their diet, it's complete bullshit. You actually regulate your pH through your lungs. So I can instantly change the pH by having you breathe faster or slower. We also breathe to smell. Try smelling without breathing. It's impossible. We breathe to speak. We also detoxify. 70% of detoxification occurs through the lungs. We also breathe to assist the heart in pumping blood. So it's no coincidence that our heart is encased by our lungs and our diaphragm, because the 23,000 breaths that we take and the 100,000 heartbeats that we have are all coordinated with the cardiorespiratory system. So you can't change your heart rate, but you can change your respiratory rate, which does directly change your heart rate. So if I wanted to raise your heart rate, I would increase your pace of breathing. If I wanted to slow down your heart rate, I would slow down the way you breathe. And so instantly we can have adjustments in those variables. We also use our breath to move lymph. You make 12 liters of lymph every day. Lymph is like the sewage products from your blood and your metabolic function. You only have 5 liters of blood. Every day you make 12 liters of lymph. The biggest lymph nodes in your body are underneath your diaphragm. If I was an intelligent designer, which God is, I would put the biggest lymph nodes underneath the diaphragm because it moves up and down 23,000 times a day. And so our diaphragm pumps that lymph and moves that waste. We also use our breath to regulate our emotions. Think about it. When you're crying, you're breathing. When you're laughing, you're breathing. When you're gasping, you're breathing. When you're sighing, you're breathing. When you're having an orgasm, your breath changes. So we use our breath to regulate our emotions, whether we realized it until today or not. We also use our breath to increase circulation. We use it to regulate our nervous system, and we can use our breath to create or enhance spiritual experiences. So the question then becomes, how should we breathe? And it really depends on what your goal is, but I'm going to share with you how you should be breathing right now. So you want to place your tongue at the roof of your mouth. So imagine that this is the roof of my mouth, and this is your tongue. You're going to just place it at the roof of your mouth, just gently laid across, okay? Not the tip, the whole tongue. The tongue at the roof of the mouth, jaws closed and relaxed, and you're going to breathe in for a count of 6 and out for a count of 6. Now, for some of you, this might feel really slow, unusually slow, and uncomfortably slow because you're not used to it, but pretty soon you'll get used to it. And maybe you start off with 4 in, 4 out, 5 in, 5 out, and then 6 in, 6 out. This is known as coherence breathing. Coherence breathing increases oxygenation of the blood by about 20%, shifts us into a more parasympathetic state. Your breathing should be slow and steady, and it should be inaudible. You're only breathing in about 10% of your capacity. So your lung capacity is usually about 5 liters. You're only breathing in about 500 milliliters of air in and out. You actually don't need to breathe a lot. In fact, with every breath you take, you only absorb about 20% of the oxygen. The other 80% just immediately gets expelled out. So we don't need a lot of oxygen to function, which means we don't need to breathe a lot to actually function. There's 3 gears to breathing. So most of the time, 99% of the time, you should be breathing in and out through your nose, especially while you sleep. If you have to exert yourself, or if you're talking, then you might breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. We call this circular breathing. And then if you're fully exerting yourself, if you're lifting something heavy or sprinting or running or, whatever the case may be, you're exerting yourself for a short period of time, you may decide to breathe in and out through your mouth. So there's times where mouth breathing is appropriate, but most of the time it's inappropriate. Okay. So nose in, nose out is the way you want to be breathing. Just always come back to that. So even if you exert yourself, let's say Nikki's doing some sprints, we want him to breathe in and out through his mouth because as he breathes in and out through his mouth, his lungs are going to rapidly expand and contract, which is going to help his heart pump more blood to his arms and legs. But then if he's coming off of that sprint, then he's going to breathe in through his nose, out through his mouth, in through his nose, out through his mouth, and then eventually he's going to come back to breathing in and out through his nose. Now, the greatest measure of your resilience is how fast you can recover. So, a measure of good exercise and good cardiorespiratory function is how fast you can recover from full exertion. So if that's your goal, then going through these gears of breathing are going to help you recover faster in between your sprints. So use this as a guide. So our immune system actually starts in our nose. When we breathe through our nose, that's a first interaction that we have with the outside world. Okay. Our nose is actually lined with a special membrane, and that membrane produces mucosal membrane produces something called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide kills viruses and pathogens on contact. Nitric oxide also increases circulation. Nitric oxide also increases vasodilation and naturally lowers blood pressure. In fact, a fun fact is that nitric oxide, Viagra rather, is a drug that increases nitric oxide levels by recycling your body's production of nitric oxide. So it doesn't help you make more, it just recycles what you already make. And what's interesting about that is that it was initially developed as a blood pressure medication, but men started having, relentless boners, so it turned into a blockbuster drug. But it was all based on nitric oxide. So when we breathe through our nose, we actually get a 6-fold increase in nitric oxide. When we hum, we get a 15-fold increase in nitric oxide. So by simply changing the way you breathe, you can increase your sexual performance. And so when we breathe through our nose, it cleanses the air. So this is why men especially don't completely shave your nose hairs, because that mechanically filters the particulates that you'd be inhaling. Just trim your nose hairs, don't shave them. When we breathe through our nose, it pressurizes the air. We actually get 20% more oxygen delivery when we breathe through our nose. Breathing through our nose slows down the air. So it's always going to feel more restrictive to breathe through your nose, and that's okay. You actually don't need to breathe as much as you think you do. So pressurization of the air will actually allow for more oxygen delivery. It moisture regulates the air, temperature regulates the air, lowers activation of the immune system. The dirtiest part of your body, if you ask any microbiologist, is your mouth. So when you breathe through your nose, the air is perfected before it goes into your lungs. When you breathe through your mouth, the air is basically loaded with all kinds of oral bacteria, and that goes into your lungs, which activates your immune system. Breathing through our nose regulates our nervous system, makes us feel more calm. It preserves our oral health. As I mentioned, breathing through your mouth is the number one cause of cavities. It dries out your saliva, causes dental decay, and changes the pH of your mouth as well. It also disinfects the air. It allows you to have better sexual performance and acts as an anti-diuretic, which means that a common side effect for a lot of people who breathe through their mouth, especially at night, is they have to wake up to go pee in the middle of the night. When we have men and women tape their mouths and basically keep their mouth closed while they're breathing at night and breathe through their nose instead, they don't have to wake up to go pee anymore. So it can help you sleep better and prevent you from having to use the restroom and waking up your partner potentially. I want you to think of the nose as an intake and think of your mouth as an exhaust. So as much as you can, breathe in and out through your nose, but when you have to, breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And then for short bursts of high intensity, again, you might decide to breathe in and out through your mouth, but you want to do that as little as possible. Now, nitric oxide is interesting because you can actually test for it. There's strips that you can use placed on your tongue for just 10 seconds, which will measure the nitric oxide levels in your saliva. And the darker the pink, the better. So we want to have nice dark pink strips. And nitric oxide nosedives after the age of 40. I know some of you might be younger than that. Some of you might be older than that. But after the age of 40, nitric oxide levels plummet. And what ends up happening for men is they end up having either hypertension and or sexual dysfunction. And they think it's testosterone, which also goes down. But the thing that nosedives the most is nitric oxide. So you can supplement with nitric oxide support products. And you can also change the way you breathe. In fact, here's a study from PubMed demonstrating that breathing like humming, for example, increases nitric oxide levels 15-fold. So when you're on your way to work, hum your favorite song. When you're in the shower, hum your favorite song. Whenever you can, just practice this really simple, practice of humming. Now let's talk about the diaphragm for a minute. If you look here, you'll see the diaphragm sits right below the lungs and attaches to your spine. So attaches from the front of your rib cage to the back, to the front of your spine. And when we inhale, the diaphragm comes down. Okay. When we exhale, the diaphragm moves up. Your diaphragm moves anywhere from 6 to 8 inches with every breath that you take. Okay. So it's a pump. It's literally a piston that's pumping the lymph, pumping the organs, pumping the digestive system, and also pumping the heart. In fact, the diaphragm is known as the second heart. The diaphragm and lungs are where we store our grief and our emotions. And so many times what we have clients do is just laying on their back, you can grab your fingers and just hook them like this. And you can exhale, relaxing your abdomen, and just feel under your rib cage, just against the front and side of your rib cage, to see if there's any trigger points there. Many people have trauma trigger points there, and they don't even know it. In fact, it's not uncommon for even grown men, big burly men a lot of times as well, that have been bullied or have had some sort of traumatic experience, or perhaps were told to stop crying or couldn't cry because crying is a way of releasing grief and emotions, that they hold on to this in their diaphragm. And when the diaphragm is stuck or dysfunctional, it basically doesn't move and function the way it's supposed to. So what ends up happening as adults, we become short, shallow breathers. And short, shallow breathers have a hairpin trigger. They're always on edge. They always feel stressed. They have low-grade anxiety, and their mood is usually dysregulated, and they don't understand why. There's nothing that they should be triggered by, but it's the way they're breathing that's keeping them in that triggered state. So I'll share a quick story. I did a presentation for about 1,000 practitioners. We did, it was a live presentation, and it was really fun. But one of the attendees attended from home. So we had about 500 people online and 1,000 people in person. And this was last May where I spoke. And so I'll just read what she shared. She said, "Thank you so much for teaching on breathwork at ECO 2024. I've known I needed to do breathwork for some time. Your sessions were amazing. On the second morning, I had so much, I had some much needed emotional releases. When I was a child, about 8 or 9, I witnessed the death of a child on the beach. He was about my age and had drowned. While I love going to the ocean, since then I've been afraid of the ocean. I hold my breath several times per day. I know we hold our emotions throughout our body, but that morning I felt like the release was coming from my diaphragm and lungs. I still catch myself holding my breath, but then I go back to the 6-second breathing technique. While I prefer to attend in person, this time it was good that it was virtual, as my tears turned into wailing. I didn't try to hold back as I would have in person. So what happens is a lot of times we're afraid to release because we're afraid of what others might think. And so sometimes for men and for women, a good cry releases those stored emotions that we're holding on to. In fact, I was speaking at an event in St. Kitts a couple of years ago, and we were doing a diaphragm release, and one of the gentlemen just burst into tears. And his name's Mike. And I said, "Mike, what's going on?" And he said, "Well, when I was young, I would get bullied all the time. So I'd have to hold my stomach really rigid because I would never know when someone's going to come and punch me." And so he would have to hold his abdomen really tight. And guess what? He'd have to hold his diaphragm really tight. So this created this tension and these trigger points in his diaphragm and these emotions that he was then holding on to. So even decades after the bullying, the emotions were still trapped in his diaphragm. Okay. So some of you might have this, some of your kids might have this, someone you love may have this, and sometimes the trigger point work can be a really powerful way to release that. Now, one of the ways to, if you know someone who has hypertension, one of the ways to get their blood pressure down is to work on their diaphragm, work on releasing their diaphragm and strengthening their diaphragm. The number one comorbidity during COVID, which is the number one reason people were hospitalized, was because of hypertension. So this is a massive, massive problem, and it's usually related to the diaphragm. The other way to lower blood pressure is by breathing through your nose, right? That increases nitric oxide 6-fold, 15-fold if you hum. The third way is to get out in the sun. When you get out in the sun, you also increase nitric oxide as well. So if you know someone with hypertension, some really, really easy ways to resolve it. We also talked about the diaphragm and the lymph. The diaphragm, as it moves up and down, pumps the lymph, pumps the organs. Even people who are constipated usually have poor breathing. You would never associate constipation with breathing, but here's the thing. Short, shallow breathers, a couple things happen. One, they don't get that piston-like pumping action, okay? So they're not moving, they're not mechanically stimulating their digestive system. And when you're in fight or flight, which is the stress response, which is induced by short, shallow breathing, taking a dump is the last thing your body needs to do. So you actually decrease bowel motility. The number one GI complaint for most people, about 34% of people who have GI issues, which is the number one complaint, is constipation. And you would almost never think that it's going to be caused by breathing. Most people think, oh, I need more fiber. So they take more fiber and they clog themselves up even more. What they actually need to do is learn how to breathe correctly and move that lymph, move that waste, and amazing things start happening. Now, some of you may or may not know this, but we also have a system in our body called the myofascial system. The myofascial system is a web-like structure that connects every single cell nucleus in our body together. It is very fascinating. It was just recently discovered in the last 20 years. We used to, I've cut open several cadavers, and when you cut open a cadaver, there's like this stringy web-like substance, and you just kind of cut through it, not thinking much of it, because you're trying to get to the muscles and the nerves. But this fascial system is like a network. It's almost like a spider web network that connects every organ and tissue in your body together. The diaphragm is the master muscle that regulates the structures of this fascial system. So very fascinating structure. To strengthen your diaphragm, it's really simple. Lay on your stomach, breathe into your belly. So simple. 30 seconds to 2 minutes a day. And over a short period of time, your breathing will significantly improve. Of course, you want to release the diaphragm first. Now let's talk about the tongue. The tongue plays a huge role in your overall health and facial structure. The tongue is fascially connected all the way to the tip of your toes. So there's the tongue at the top. Here's all the fascia. There's the diaphragm right there. And it connects all the way to the tip of your toes. Most people would never guess that. Okay. So when we look at somebody's structure, we don't just look at, if they have a problem in their foot, it literally could be coming from their tongue. And I'll show you some crazy, crazy case studies. So where should we place our tongue? The tongue should be placed across the roof of the mouth. There's the roof of the mouth. And what I want you to know is that the roof of your mouth is the bottom of your sinuses. Okay. So the bigger your dental arch is, the wider open it is, the bigger your sinuses are. Now, what happens is, I'm just going to draw here real quick, is this is where your tongue should sit. Okay. Now, if the tongue is sitting in the bottom of your mouth, let me go back. So if your tongue is placed at the roof of your mouth, it's impossible to breathe through your mouth. It just seals your mouth. So you're going to automatically breathe through your nose. When your tongue is placed in the bottom of your mouth, you can breathe through your mouth. But what also happens is these tissues start caving in. Okay. And what this leads to is small dental arches. So you'll probably noticed this day and age that many children have to have their teeth pulled. Dentists love this. Okay. And the reason this happens is because they don't have enough space in their dental arch. Many of you, including myself, before I knew better, have probably had your wisdom teeth pulled. Okay. Nobody has too many teeth. What we have is too little jaw. So in India, for example, where my parents are from, they didn't have a dentist. They didn't have an orthodontist. They didn't have braces. They didn't have cavities. They didn't have any of the problems that modern people have. They didn't even use a toothbrush. And it sounds so weird, they would chew on branches of a neem tree. Now they make toothpaste out of neem oil. Okay. So they would chew like a dog on this branch. And by chewing on this branch, it would actually stimulate their jaw, causing the proper formation of their dental arches. The reason people's jaws are smaller now and they don't accommodate their teeth is because they're mouth breathers, or their tongue is miscorrectly placed in the bottom of their mouth, and they don't chew hard things. So kids now are given purees, they're given smoothies, they're given yogurt, they're given mechanically processed foods. Did you know, this is a fun fact, side note, but junk food is designed so that you actually chew it less. It's designed so that instead of taking 20 bites to disintegrate in your mouth, it disintegrates in 4 to 5 bites. And the number of times we chew our food is directly proportional to how much satiety it gives us. So the less you chew something, the less satiated you feel. So people can eat a whole bag of chips without realizing they ate a whole bag of chips because they didn't have to chew very much. But if you eat something like jerky, which is very tough, you can't eat a lot of it because the fact that you're chewing it so much tells your body that you've eaten enough. So this is proper tongue placement. If you can keep your tongue there, it acts as a spacer, pushes everything out. Okay. So your lips and your tongue work together to act like braces for your teeth. Now, one thing to look for, this is much more common than we might think, is something called a tongue tie. A tongue tie is this bottom of your tongue. So if you lift your tongue, you'll see a little stringy frenulum there at the bottom. Now, what happens for some people, especially you'll see this in children, is they have too much of a tongue tie. And some people have a severe tongue tie where they can't even lift their tongue to the roof of their mouth. And what this results in is difficulty latching on. So if your child or a grandchild has difficulty latching, it could be because they have a tongue tie. And so that needs to be addressed. When children have a tongue tie, they are more likely to suck their thumb. And so here's what happens. If you look at this child, okay, you can see that their thumb pushed their upper palate upwards. So instead of having a nice flat, wide upper palate, they use their thumb to push and push this all upwards, causing a small, narrow airway. The reason they were sucking their thumb is because their tongue couldn't reach the roof of their mouth. And this magic button in the roof of your mouth soothes your nervous system. What you'll also notice is that there isn't enough room for his teeth. So they're going to start pulling those teeth. And so this child is going to grow up with a narrow airway, probably be a habitual mouth breather, probably have chronic behavioral disorder, probably have chronic anxiety as an adult, have a hard time focusing, probably be medicated, start snoring as an adult, get divorced. I mean, it's just like a downhill slope, a slippery slope when breathing becomes dysfunctional. So pay attention to how your children are breathing and make these corrections if necessary. Here's another interesting fact. Your tongue is directly connected to your shoulder through a muscle called the omohyoid. And here's my wife's, my wife had a tongue tie, and it wasn't until she was an adult that she realized this. And so I know some of you may not be chiropractors here, but if we look at her cervical neck curvature, you can see how straight her neck is. Your neck should have a nice C-shaped curve. Immediately after getting her tongue tie release, you can see her neck curve totally restored itself. The common issue that she would have is chronic tension in her neck and shoulders. With a quick 30-second surgery, it completely disappeared, and she was once again able to touch her toes. She was never able to touch her toes, but as soon as she clipped this, or the surgeon, the dentist clipped this for her, she was immediately able to touch her toes again. Okay, so remember, the tongue is connected to every other organ and system in your body. And by releasing it, if it's too tight, it's going to completely change your health and your posture and all kinds of things. So I think, Carrier, you were asking about posture. So this is an example how posture is so closely connected to the tongue. Okay. So tongue ties are a big thing and very, very commonly overlooked. Now let's talk about mouth breathing, and then we'll wrap things up. There's a lot more I can cover, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So here's some common signs of mouth breathing: dry mouth, somebody who's always thirsty, bad breath, drooling at night, snoring, waking up often to go pee at night, feeling tired even after you wake up at night, or even after adequate amounts of sleep, timing of sleep, anxiety and feeling stressed for no reason, high blood pressure, lack of morning erection, and poor concentration and focus. You can see here how this, in this model here, how the shape of this person's face is completely different compared to, and the posture is different compared to somebody who's a habitual mouth breather. Okay, so breathing through the mouth is going to change for the worse our posture and our facial structure. It's going to change the shape of your jaw, shape of your nose, and also the arch in your cervical spine as well. What happens is, if you study the jaws of humans from hundreds of years ago, they had what's called a prognathic jaw. So you can see how these lines come together. They're perpendicular. This day and age, most people's jaws are actually retrognathic. So the jaw gets pushed backwards, and there's consequences of that. It makes the sinuses smaller, and it also makes the airway smaller. So what we see is a smaller airway, especially down here, and we see smaller sinuses. So if you compare the sinuses and airway of this person on the left, you can see how much bigger it is. And so just like a car performs better with a bigger air intake, the human body performs better with a nice air intake. So we'll talk about ways to improve facial structure, really simple things that people can do: mouth taping, chewing blocks, tongue posture, chewing hard foods. Miswak is like a stick that you can chew on. If you ever give a child a toothbrush, the first thing they do is chew on it. They don't brush their teeth. They chew on it because they intuitively know that that's what they should be doing. Getting kids to chew foods versus smoothies and purees, avoiding processed foods, mewing exercises. You can look that up on YouTube. And then phalum gum. So phalum gum is a Turkish gum you can order on Amazon, but it's really hard and dense. It's like a workout for your jaw. So you can see in 10 months of doing these exercises, you can see the way this person's facial structure completely changed. Okay, so the changes can happen very quickly. So phalum gum is something you can do 15 minutes a day. It's like a workout for your mouth. Mouth taping, just placing the tape vertically like this, keeps the mouth closed, the jaw relaxed. The Boston Celtics, they started mouth taping, won an NBA championship. If you have young kids, you can use something called myotape, which is a tape that goes around the mouth. So they can still talk and they can still breathe through their mouth if they need to, but when they fall asleep, their mouth stays in a closed position. And you can see snoring and apnea and mouth breathing, if untreated at 5 years of age, increases special education needs by 40%. Okay, so this is how devastating mouth breathing is to the human. Leslie says, 2 days into mouth taping and I'm floored how much better I feel and how much more energy I have. Brain fog, intense fatigue, and headaches are gone. And I have enough energy to work out again. So simple things, like literally 5 cents worth of treatment made all the difference in the world for her. So I will leave you guys with just a couple of things that I wanted to share. If you're finding this interesting and you want to dive a little bit deeper into this world, you can grab a special gift that I have for you. It's the Ultimate Breathwork Bundle, where I go a little bit deeper into these things. I share specific exercises. I have a fully guided psychedelic breathwork experience that you get. It's all free, nothing to sell you. It's just my way of helping humanity breathe better and helping all of you become better versions of yourselves.
I have a history of pneumonia.
Okay.
When I was younger. And so with all the scar tissue that has built, my lung capacity is not ideal. Do you have any thoughts, recommendation for that?
Yeah, so a good thing would be for you, really for everyone, is to practice breath work. So I would get something called an incentive spirometer. An incentive spirometer looks like this. You can buy it on Amazon for like $20. So this helps you measure and increase your lung capacity. Okay. I would also practice the crocodile pose, which is that exercise of laying on your stomach. And I would try to work on releasing your diaphragm. So just doing some self diaphragm release, those things will make a pretty significant difference for you to get started. And then, slowly, work on the mouth taping. and trying to habitually breathe through your nose as much as you can throughout the day and just creating awareness around that, and then mouth taping at night. And within a few weeks, you should notice a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome.
That's amazing. Men, click on that link that Sachin gave you and go get that stuff for yourself. I highly recommend it.
So I've done Wim Hof. I've also done elemental breath work. 3 rounds versus 8 rounds. Is there a major benefit other than an emotional release or a trauma release?
Yeah. So I think that the type of breath work that you can do the most consistently is going to be the most beneficial. So I like the Wim Hof, or even a single round of the elemental breath work is going to be a great place to start, or do like have a daily practice. And then I would say when you want to go a little bit deeper and you want to kind of release things and be more introspective, shut off that default mode network, then I would say, 5 to 6 rounds of elemental would be a great place to get to. And then, I would also say, like, I have a client who does the elemental rhythm every day. So he does an hour every single day. And he's just been through so much stuff that he just keeps, kind of peeling the onion more and more and more each time he does it. So it just depends on what you're feeling called to. But I would say having a consistent breathwork practice, like most things, is probably better than having a heroic type of practice.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Really appreciate you, brother. It's good seeing you.
Likewise. My pleasure. Thank you.
Since you're a man with, facial grooming going on, what's a good tape? I know Joe Rogan talks a lot about hostage tape. Do you go to do you use that, or is that
no? Great question. So I use the 3M micropore tape. You can get it on Amazon. You can get a pack of 12 for $10. It'll last you 3 years.
Micropore?
Micropore. 3M micropore tape. Yeah. Most mouth tapes are, once something becomes an industry, then it usually becomes all about marketing and being overpriced. Yeah. So the 3M micropore tape works amazingly well. You just place it vertically. I have facial hair, works totally fine. If you find that it's too sticky, then just dab it on your t-shirt a couple of times and then put it on. It'll come off much easier. The way you would take it off, James Nestor and our friends, and he wrote the book Breath, for those of you that may know that. And one of the things that he says is just push the tape out with your tongue. It comes out easier that way.
I wanted to start mouth taping because I thought that's a really applicable thing that you can do. I don't want to see if it makes a difference. And a bunch of the ones that I saw that were like, like you said, marketing took it up, and it's like you're going to be spending a bunch of money every month to do it. And so I'm really glad to hear that you, someone who does it so often, was just like, yeah, just buy this and it's $12. I thought that was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Dickie. It's funny because Hostage Tape took some of my videos and used my reels. And then my friend messaged me. He's like, "Oh, you're recommending Hostage Tape?" Well, I never told those fuckers that I recommend them. But I actually don't recommend them. I just recommend I recommend mouth taping, but I also recommend things that are accessible and affordable. And the mouth tape from 3M works perfectly fine. That's exactly what James Nestor uses as well. So, there certainly are more expensive alternatives, but you're mostly paying for hype with those things. Yeah. No. And there's actually no need to seal your mouth. You actually don't need to do that.
Yeah. And I also really liked, so I'm in school for osteopathy right now. And so I really liked all the connections you made with the diaphragm and the nervous system and tongue to toe. Like, I know that all exists. So that was a really, really cool presentation for me.
Thank you. Yeah. I wish they taught this in school, like all the connections. It's like,
they teach it to us. Like, we learn them, but like you have to, it's not like you went to Cairo school. They probably didn't teach it to you like that, like you're learning it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they definitely taught us the anatomy and physiology, but not the how connected it is to everything.
Yeah, and I really liked how you talked about like just the breathing. It's just like so a lot like breathing and how the lungs affect the heart and affects it. Like it's how the human machine works, right? Mm-hmm. Although we like to split it all up, but
yeah,
it doesn't work like that.
You really start to see how like breath is such a lead domino in our health.
Yeah.
And how it's so easy to overlook it because it's not terribly sexy. But when you start researching it and studying it and connecting the dots, you start to quickly realize how how important it is.
Oh, that was a great presentation. When you first let it off and said, hey, mouth or your breathing is the most important thing and it ties to everything else, it sounded like a lot of hype, but you did a really fantastic job proving your point.
Thank you.
I think like others here, I've got I have that mastic. I think mastic gum is the same, right? It's the stuff from Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've had that. I've used it. Interestingly, my son took it because he saw online that it could make your jawline look better, and he's just starting to want to date girls. So he took my gum, but I have I did get suckered in by the hostage tape marketing spiel, so I did buy that, but I never even used it. It's just sitting there in my drawer. I learned pranayama breathing in Bikram yoga class, but I never do it. So I think what's great is that I have some of the components. I just haven't made it a priority, and I'm definitely going to do it. It doesn't take a lot of time, so I appreciate it. I'm going to check out the bundle that you have and see how that might help me.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing I'll say. There was a slide that I didn't get to, but it's called. Some of you might know BJ Fogg. He wrote the book Tiny Habits.
Yeah.
And so to change a behavior, you have a motivation. So hopefully I motivated you all to breathe a little bit better, with more awareness. The ability, you all have the ability, but now all you need is a prompt. So what I tell people to do and encourage them to do is, it's not about breath work that you do for 10 minutes every day. That's great. How are you breathing the other 99% of the day? That's where the shifts, that's where the opportunity is, because if you can change the way you breathe throughout the day, then that's going to be amazing for you. So think of something you think about often. So for me, it's my son or my wife, or I check email. So every time you think of that thing, anchor your breath to it. So every time you pick up your phone, think of your breath next. So instead of creating a new habit, just anchor the habit of raising awareness around your breath around something you already do.
I love this. I absolutely love everything you've done today. We got two men who haven't had a chance to comment, so I'm just going to give them a quick chance. Garcia Nelson and Aceman, comments, questions for Patel?
Yeah, Patel, thank you. It was a great presentation. Most of my questions were the taping thing and the gum thing, so those have been answered.
Awesome.
Kind of a new thing for me, even just, I've heard about it, but didn't have much info. So this is a great thing, and I'll definitely check your package out, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Aceman.
Yeah, there's a lot here. Thanks a lot, for presenting today. I never understood how the longevity thing worked as far as breath goes. That was really cool to see how that worked out on the graph. But also, you've given me a lot of takeaways here, just for regular life. Like, I'm going to get the gum and other things too. So, and same with the 6-second rule, as well as regular breathing. So that's phenomenal. So the other things I thought was really interesting when you talk about humming. Now, I can't make a lot of, when I'm in certain environments and I'm working really hard, I can't say anything, but I find myself humming for some reason. I don't know why. So that makes sense. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, it's very soothing to hum as well, because anything that we do that lengthens our exhale will soothe our nervous system.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times our nervous system, without even our conscious awareness, will do things that we don't even know, because it's trying to self-regulate. So for example, if somebody yawns, it's because they're not taking deep breaths. So the nervous system will make you yawn. If somebody's stressed, sometimes we'll start humming. And so it'll soothe your nervous system. So your body is, remember I said that the breath is an adaptogen. So your nervous system is using it to regulate your nervous system, regulate itself.
Patel, thank you so much. God bless you for coming here today.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.